We need dedicated pronouns for this. It's hard. Welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing, where the anchors are out of this world and the points don't matter. We are here to train your eye so you can learn faster and dance better. I'm Cassie Winter.
I'm Alicia Marshall. And if you're wondering who are we to be analyzing these pros, Cassie and I both have extensive training in both solo and partner dancing. She has about 21 years. I have about 23. And we are not really here to be judging people. We're really just here to keep it scientific and really look at what's happening between two people. That being said, we are talking about something tonight.
Tonight's topic is dancing your non-dominant role, but also we're going to do a little teaser at the end, which may or may not turn into me ranting for a while, on the plight of the tall follow. When we're talking about dancing your non-dominant role tonight to start out, we're taking more of a shallow dive into this topic tonight, and we're going to highlight both dancers who are leader dominant, who are following, and also dancers who are follow dominant, who are leading. And we're planning on in December to do specific episodes on each one of those. So this is just part one of the shenanigans that are to come. Yes. Also, we have planned to do a US Open themed November for reasons. So stick around for that. Anyways, the first video we are going to be watching tonight is of Phoenix Gray and Michelle Crozier from Swingcouver 2020. I'm going to drop the link in the chat. Go ahead and give it a watch, and then we'll get to analyzing. All right, so before I do the now branded doodle-doo, I want to talk a little bit about Phoenix in particular, because yes, Phoenix, gendered male. However, he prefers following. So even though he's leading for the majority of this dance, I consider him as a follow dominant who is then leading, even though he falls under the category that I like to call ambidancerous, a term an old friend of Phoenix's and mine coined, actually, where he's really adept at both roles, but ultimately he is a follow first and a leader second, which is why he and I actually don't dance together very often. It's very sad. We're like, but I want to follow. But I want to follow. So we do switch dances, so both of us get to follow. Anyways, to the screen share. To start off here, we have Phoenix leading Michelle, and this isn't necessarily in priority of what I wanted to talk about it. We're just going in order of the dance where I had bookmarks. But one thing I've always noticed in myself as follow first, leader second, is I have a tendency to really like lock out my free arm as a leader. And I just noticed that was something Phoenix is doing here through this section. And I feel like that comes from when you're a follow first and you go to lead, you really prioritize the connection and being there to counterbalance your partner.
Yeah.
And it's harder to dance and loosen up your free arm because we're all like, we are laser focused on taking care of our follows when we're follow dominant.
Yeah.
We're leading. We're like, I shall take care of you. And the other thing that tends to happen, and I don't know if you've noticed this too, Alicia, is that when you're follow dominant and you lead, you tend to not dance of your own volition as much. You're dancing through the partner.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's something I noticed.
I agree.
Yeah, and that's something I noticed through this as well. So through this section, this is really interesting because this is actually the first point in the dance where Michelle tries to take the lead, but Phoenix does not allow it to happen.
Yep.
So see right there, Michelle has put her right hand on Phoenix's back. And she's really leaning to her left and hoping, I believe, to send Phoenix out down the slot in this direction. However, Phoenix is way too grounded for that, I think is what's going on. And Michelle ends up going around him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and this is where we get into Michelle is also follow dominant, leader second. And it takes a lot of grounding and intention to take a lead through closed position like this.
Yeah.
And what would have helped her is if she had placed her foot sooner and driven her center over and past it, instead of keeping her foot outside the frame of her body. Because she wasn't able to break that line, but coming towards us in the camera, that's why Phoenix did not feel like she was really taking over the lead.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's this little awkward closed position like, are you in control? Am I in control? Who's in control? If you've danced a switch dance, we all have that at least once a dance where you're like, wait, who's leading?
Yeah.
And it's actually funny. The better you get at switching, the longer you can live in that purgatory, and it's fine. But sometimes you eventually just stop and look at each other and go, who's leading?
Which is funny that you say that, because it reminds me, watching lead dominants follow, like a lot of the time you'll see they come out of like a break position of some sort, and then they're like, oh, I'm following. Like you visibly see that thought go through their minds.
Yep. They have this moment going, oh, wait, I'm not, oh, I have to wait. What? And that's funny because actually in the next video, it's a video of me and Z from Rama 2018. He has a moment where a break is over and then he just starts leading himself. And I'm like, I'm going to pretend I led that. But we'll get there. So what was nice about this moment is Michelle like realized that her taking the lead wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
And they didn't fight each other for Phoenix to continue leading through this. So it actually, like, it ended up being a really nice section of the dance, and it led to the next switch that happens, that there is actually a switch, and that one is great. It's really satisfying. But see, even here, Michelle is like, me, and Phoenix is like, no, me.
Yep. And it's funny because this section of the dance goes by so quickly that like you really don't notice it unless you're really paying attention to what they're doing, because you can see, even though she ends up with her hand up under his like on his shoulder blade, he also ends up with his hand on her shoulder blade. So it's really hard to tell.
Yep. And then one thing I will say, when you're dancing with someone your height or taller, it can be really helpful, instead of having your fingers parallel in this direction, to instead have them pointing upwards.
Yeah.
And that would be a lot gentler on Michelle's wrist. And it would also feel more secure for Phoenix, because right now she's actually broken at her wrist and her whole hand is perpendicular to her forearm. And that doesn't actually create a pocket for the follow to sink into. And so that's probably also part of the reason why Phoenix did not start following here.
Yeah, the way that she has it placed, it looks like it's communicating more that I'm just putting this here for connection rather than like I'm now taking over.
Yeah.
Which is valid. You can, place an extra hand for connection.
Yes, I often do that because especially if a leader wants me to dance in continuous pivots with them, it's easier for me to stay shaped to them appropriately for continuing pivots. But what's funny though is I have switched roles so long that sometimes my brain backfires in moments like that and goes like, wait, I am still following, right? and I have to tell myself, don't lead, don't lead, don't lead, don't lead. And then when I get led out of that position finally into an anchor and I can follow a one, I'm like, whew, I made it. Didn't take over. Because I do have the skill in my leading, and I also just am the sized person that it's really easy for me to overpower any partner.
Yeah.
So
especially ones that aren't super grounded.
Yeah. I have to use my power wisely. All right, so now we're moving into the first switch of this dance. First of all, I just want to highlight how beautiful Michelle's styling was right there through that anchor. Gorgeous.
Yeah. I love that Phoenix follows through with his line as well.
Right? It's just so nice. And I love how she dynamically really uses level changes in her dancing. It just looks so beautiful on her height, which is another thing we'll probably talk about next week. And I'm so jealous because my knees don't work that way. I do standing and I do higher than the standing. I do not do lower than the standing. Anyways, so
squatting does not happen.
Squatting, no, not without excessive support because my kneecaps don't do their job properly. It's a good time. So Phoenix is leading a sugar push. Michelle is following said sugar push. And similar to what Jen and Sam did in our episode last week, Michelle is then starting to lead out the back half of the sugar push.
Yeah.
And part of that is her taking a large step and really driving through that weight transfer and shaping Phoenix.
Yep.
So I'll back up a little bit. And you can see she's really using both hands. She's drawing Phoenix's right side toward her and allowing his left side to stay away from her. And then she draws his left side through. Pronouns are hard. And leads a turn.
Yes. She does a really good job of using her back leg.
Yeah.
It's just because you take a step backwards, it doesn't necessarily add any extra power to it.
Yeah. And part of it is she's already transferring her center as she's extending the foot.
Yeah.
If it were a completely delayed weight transfer, Phoenix wouldn't be able to feel it. But because she is sending her center with the foot and then creating a partial delayed weight transfer and continuing her momentum over that, that's what's allowing Phoenix to feel it.
Yeah, and as soon as she places that right leg, she really uses it to kind of like drive through things, which, is a lead thing. So she does a good job of taking it from a follow, taking a step back to driving through it. It's a very seamless transition.
Yeah, and it's really important to understand not only the percentage of delayed weight transfer difference between a follow stepping backwards versus a leader stepping backwards, but also the timing of that. Because in order for a follow to take over the lead, you have to accelerate your movement at some point.
Yes.
And usually you're accelerating your movement as you arrive onto count 4 of a 6 count or count 6 of an 8 count. You are accelerating your arrival onto that foot because traditionally the way West Coast swing functions, a leader is behind the rhythm so they can follow, whereas a leader is ahead of the rhythm so they can lead. So if a follow wants to start leading, they have to go from behind the rhythm to ahead, which means they need to zoom right over the rhythm for a split second and be like, see you later. So that way it's really clear. And also you might even accelerate a little bit more and be extra ahead of the rhythm. So your partner is super clear that they're understanding that they're following now.
Yeah.
So Michelle is still leading here. And I love how Phoenix takes the lead right here.
Yeah.
This is something he and I have actually taught together in workshops. It's such a satisfying way to take the lead. And he does it in such a way that he very much looks like a leader out the other end. So he's very much following. You can tell he's a follower. You can tell Michelle's a leader. And all he does is this really big count 4. And you can see how his right arm is still bent. And that's increasing the tension in the handhold,
Mm-hmm.
indicating that Michelle should wait for a second. And also because he's accelerating through this 4, that is also indicating that she should wait.
Yes.
And then he leads the prep so effortlessly out of that, and creates such a lovely masculine leading line through here. It's very powerful.
It is.
Next. So here's another example of Michelle taking the lead from this back half of a sugar push.
Yep. I appreciate that he tends to use toe leads.
Me too.
A lot of times, I feel like men in general, like whether they're follow or lead dominant, tend to do more of, lead with the heel.
Mm-hmm. So this is one of those moments where I feel like Phoenix is actually giving up the lead because of the timing difference.
Mm-hmm.
So if we back up a little bit, he has this strong drive into the sugar push. But then after he places his right foot here, right here, he lifts up his left foot, but he doesn't go anywhere.
Yep.
And it's one of those things where he did lead her backwards, and he could have then continued leading. However, through the connection, she got the message that yes, she can take over, and he would reciprocate that.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's able to take over the lead. And Phoenix is incredibly sensitive to changes in connection. And he's also, I would say, one of the best ambidextrous dancers for giving up the lead when he's leading and wanting to follow. And I would say it's much harder to take the follow than it is to take the lead. Taking the lead is really straightforward. It's about being using power and being assertive.
Yeah.
But to go from being the powerful, assertive role in the partnership to the follow role requires a subtlety to changes in the connection and in the positioning. Yeah. But it also requires a sensitive follow who knows what then to do with that. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to highlight that's one of the things Phoenix is incredible at. So right through here, once again, Phoenix took a really big step. I think he was expecting to take the lead again, like he did earlier. However, Michelle grabbed onto his back and it became a telemark. Mm-hmm. And because of how large of a step he had taken, it was then very difficult for her to get actually around him properly and continue a linear telemark. And that's why I ended up coming forward down the stage towards the audience.
Yeah.
But what's cool about those slight miscommunications is you can end up with some really interesting things out of a switch dance when that kind of stuff happens.
Yeah.
Well, I just noticed she's wearing they're both wearing his t-shirt, but for those of you who are not familiar with the glorious t-shirt that they are wearing, there is back in the days when Phoenix could go to Starbucks, he would post pictures of how the Starbucks baristas would write his name on his Starbucks cups.
Yeah.
And they'd always spell them wrong. There was this one time somebody actually spelled it right. We were like, yeah, well done. Yeah. But so the t-shirt is basically a whole bunch of different versions of spellings of his name crossed out. Anyways, it's great. Last one. This one is interesting because from what I understand of what's going on here is Michelle is the one giving up the lead. So like I was talking about earlier, how Phoenix is really good at that. This time Michelle is giving up the lead. And part of what she's doing to give it up is putting herself in a follows anchored position and simply waiting.
I would agree.
Yeah, she's just anchoring back. She's counterbalancing herself with her right leg in case Phoenix were not to get the message.
Yep.
But Phoenix gets the message so well that he leads with a follows timing. His one is on his right foot. And while some people would get mad, be like, that's incorrect, he's leading now, it should be his left foot. I'm like, he still led her in a correctly timed pattern, even though he was on, quote unquote, the wrong foot.
Yeah.
So I consider that very advanced footwork, basically.
I agree. I think that even in like your dominant role, like so many people are concerned about having the correct footwork, and I don't think that is I don't think it's helpful. I think it's a lot easier to follow through with wherever your feet are at.
Yep. Like there is a place for when you're first learning to try to get your muscle memory so they can revert to quote unquote correct.
Yes.
So you have something to fall back on.
Absolutely.
But then at the end of the day, it's understanding the function of what you need to accomplish for the next part of the dance. So right here, Phoenix is taking a step to his left because he thinks he's anchoring as a follow. But then he's like, oh no, but she's anchoring as a follow. Like he was solely ready to draw because he's drawing his right foot together and he's ready to take a beautiful forward step like Michelle is doing. And then he's like, wait a second, I can't do that. So how do I give her the information to go that way from this position? And he does that by continuing his center and crossing in front. Like his center progressed. He lifted the hand. So this hand getting lifted is also really key because taking a hand straight up will also draw follow forward. And so, chef's kiss. It's very beautiful.
That moment where they're both in the follows anchor position reminds me of that Spider-Man meme.
It's like, what? No, you. No, you. No, you. All right. So our next dance is of yours truly, because apparently I want to beat myself up today, and Z from Orama 2018. The video that I'm going to send you the link for is of the entire final, but in theory, the link should take you about 10 to 10 and a half minutes in, which is where my spotlight with Z occurs. And also, I want to preface that one of the reasons why we chose a dance of me in it is because I can give you actual, like, direct felt experience of leading Z. So, yes, you get to read my mind for a second. Also, when I found this video, I realized, oh, he and I are the thumbnail.
Yep.
Good times. Link is in the chat. Go ahead and give Z's and my spotlight a watch. Again, it's 10 to 10 and a half minutes into the video is when it starts.
Yep.
Don't get sucked in and watch the rest of the video, though. Just stop after we walk off.
So Bryn and Chris are after you guys.
They are great, but we'll hopefully do them in December. So
yes.
To the screen share. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is one of the things that I noticed the most when a leader dominant West Coast swing dancer follows is they tend to have the same forward intention that you need as a leader. Because in general, in West Coast swing, leaders have forward intention in order to lead backwards, and followers have backward intention in order to follow forwards.
Yep.
I'm not going to say that again. I think my tongue would actually turn into a knot.
Counterintuitive, but correct.
Counterintuitive. So what happens a lot is leader dominant dancers who then follow carry that forward intention into their following, and they really struggle to sit back into the pocket of an
Right.
anchor. So if we look at this very beginning here, I, through this whole dance, was struggling to figure out how to get Z back into the pocket. And I finally figured it out at the very end. Basically, it was like, move! I had to scroll as if my life depended on it.
Sounds about right.
But so at this very beginning, the thing that I learned from this moment is that Z is ready to go. And I have to work to make sure he stays in the pocket and on time. So that way we're not ahead of the music as a partnership. But you can see how I was trying to maintain a center counterpoint here as I started shifting away from him.
Yep.
And what I wanted was for his torso to end up here.
Yes.
Just half a step over to screen left. So that way his center would be over his foot instead of closer to me. But instead, he didn't shift any further away from me and already started coming towards me.
Yeah. Which is something very typical that you'll see with lead dominant follow. And like instead of sitting back, they'll come towards you.
Yep. And so I realized that, oh, he's coming at me. So I'm going to make it look like I led that. So you can see how my hand all of a sudden kind of dissociates from my body. And I bring it out in front of me and down the slot. And it's no longer attached to my contra body because I wanted to make it look like we were still together.
Yeah, and you can kind of see, like, even with that he, like, his side of the connection is moving a little bit first.
Yep.
It's getting into that prepped position before you're getting there.
Yep.
Ever so slightly, but...
Ever so slightly. But it's that minor timing difference that makes a huge difference, because until the very last, I'd say, quarter of this dance, I felt like I was following him, even though I was technically leading.
Yes.
And there is a place for that as a follow to really add a lot to the dance. However, you can do that while still following.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of how I hit this next thing right here. Wow. Reminds me of Tim Kenny from last week.
Yep.
That's funny. Anyways.
I love that second that he had a thought of like, what am I doing with this?
Right? Because apparently he couldn't wait for me to lead something. He had to make a decision.
Which is fair.
Which is fair. And then, I hadn't actually really thought about this, but you can see how where I am connected to him right here is not going anywhere when he sinks into that hip. If he had actually taken the connection in my hand that way, just a few inches, I would have then had something to lead. But because he's so braced at an angle here, he stopped himself, and there is no energy to redirect. He has actually stopped his momentum. And that is why, I mean, I'm not just going to stand there and do nothing. A part of why I started going with him was to encourage him to connect.
Yeah.
And also make it look like it's not arbitrary when I moved away from him right here. Because I had to move away from him to create any sort of stretch in the connection to then lead him. I do like that pose he strikes right there.
Yep.
It's very Michael Jackson. Now to this anchor. So I really do enjoy this fun footwork that Z was doing.
Yeah.
The only problem is he didn't actually finish into the pocket.
Yep.
With the connection. So if you pay, so if you pay attention to his right shoulder in particular, as he places his left foot down right here, that right shoulder should be getting a little bit further away from me.
Mm-hmm.
But he's already overextended, and he thinks me going away from him means already come with me. But it means originally sink into the connection.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm one of the few female leaders who can handle a really heavy connection because of my size.
Yeah.
So take advantage of it, people.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun, or at least I've been told so. But you can see really through this position that he's in. I mean, it's gorgeous. Like, I actually really like the line this is creating.
I agree. I love the styling choices that he's made.
Yeah. The only problem is that his shoulder is not over his standing foot.
Mm-hmm. It needs to tuck back a little.
Yeah, so if we were to make it really obvious where his shoulder is, if we were to redraw this, all right, so standing foot, but we put his connected shoulder directly over that standing foot, and then have him arcing through there, and his hip swing is actually dependent on me.
Yeah.
That would be gorgeous. That's how Nicole Ramirez gets her gorgeous arcs through her body. Yeah. It's because she's doing this and depending on her leader.
And I think that that's something that lead dominant that are following struggle with is giving up their body weight to somebody else.
Yep. And another thing, Z isn't struggling with this to the extent that I see normally, but it's also really common for leader dominant dancers who follow when they go to turn their palm over, because as a leader, most of the time your palm is facing up.
Yeah.
But as a follower, your palm is facing down. Most leader dominant dancers, when they go to turn their palm over, they do it from the shoulder. Yeah. And that disengages their frame. So Z is actually doing it like a tiny, tiny, tiny bit right here. But a lot of leaders do it so much that they almost actually tip to the side, like their right shoulder comes up and forward. But when you're a leader trying to follow, if you just flip your palms over from the wrist and maintain the rest of your frame, you'll actually be in good shape. You don't have to change as much as you think you do.
Yeah.
Then I wanted to talk about this open whip. I think there was a split second in my head where I wanted to do a one-footed spin. But I realized because of the way Z was pitching himself, I wasn't going to get the tension here that I would need to do that. And it would also be cruel to let go of him. I would be a bad leader if I were to let go of him. So I let him pass me and did a hammerlock open whip. But I didn't have any tension for that redirect. So I kind of lost track of where he was. And I just hoped he was coming towards me. Because if you watch again, he's kind of leaving his shoulders here in space.
Yeah, forward.
I'm going to actually turn on ghosting so you can keep seeing that line. Doesn't help that the camera is moving. But you can see how the shoulder that he is connected to me with doesn't actually get further away from me.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, and I notice this a lot when I'm actually teaching follow dominant dancers to follow better, that there's also a disconnect with, is that you need to make sure before you finish movement through your hips, you've connected through your connected shoulder first.
Yeah.
Which means whichever shoulder is connected to your partner needs to actually travel through space away from them or towards them if it's compression. But it needs to travel away to establish tension, and then it ripples through the body.
Yeah. So, like, what he's actually doing in this with his lower body is absolutely fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's just because he's leaving the upper body a little bit forward and not pulling it back with him
Mm-hmm.
that it's not quite getting enough stretch.
Yep. And he's also using so much contra body, which again is fine. It's just that I don't then feel it
right
in a way that I can use it,
mm-hmm.
which I would really appreciate.
Right.
And I would like
been a little bit more up above that back foot, you would have felt it.
Yeah. And I would say that some of you might be going like, but connect in a hammerlock position, Cassie, won't that kill you? No, I do this very specifically in a way that it won't kill me. And I also want to highlight how high, and granted, I do have a genetic connective tissue disorder, so I understand most people can't do this. However, I lifted this handhold high enough so it would have been comfortable for him to have a linear connection with. Whereas if it had been down here, that would have forced him to bend over even more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's something else that I think that you see fairly frequently with lead dominance is that the arm that they're connected with tends to be up higher and away from the body rather than dropping the elbow and relaxing it in.
Yep. They kind of just live at full extension.
Yeah.
And don't have any wiggle room in between.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really important as a follow.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we watch him through this turn, like he does a gorgeous turn right here. I love the shape he does going into it. He has a lot of control. However, he's doing this 100% without me.
Yeah.
And you can tell in my eyes. All I've got is what I see. There's nothing here. I'm just like, I am doing my best to make sure that that handhold is going around the axis that he is dancing.
Yeah.
So I see him again. I see him shaping. So I'm paying attention. I see that he is in a compromised frame right here. So I, at this point, am following because I don't want to hurt him.
Yep.
But right here, what I would have loved is for him to continue his rotation from this shoulder that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
But instead, he has 100% control of his turn, which is a valid choice to make as a follow. Like he and I don't have extensive experience dancing together. So like he might just not trust me because he's not used to following me. That's fine. But because his right shoulder kind of doesn't go any further away from me than Ben McHenry's hand, you can see that I had to suddenly extend my arm and get away to encourage some sort of stretch, and also to be far enough away from him for what on earth happened next. And you can see
that's a great face that you're making.
I know. I'm like, oh my God, he's coming at me. I didn't know. And what's funny is like if he had really right through here, and I'm going to use the square again. If the only thing we moved was this just to here, so he was actually centered over his standing foot, I would have had a lot of tension in the handhold, and I could have really snapped him towards me on purpose.
Yeah.
But because he's already traveling towards me, I'm like, oh geez. Oh geez. And you can see I reach out my left hand to be like, slow down. Chill, slow down. And I think I started applying pressure to his back with my left hand. I was just like, okay, chill. And then he's like, okay, this is what we're doing. I remember this moment being so glad the judges couldn't see my face, because my face was like, because I'm like, well, that was awkward. I just suddenly had a human launch themselves at me. Like, that could have been really cool. If it had been on purpose, if he had really sunk into that connection, I would have been like, bam, and just like whipped him at me. That would have been really great. But instead, I'm just like deer in headlights. Hi. All right, back to the screen share. Diddle-a-diddle-a-diddle-a-doo. And so I'm here freaking out. My face is like, oh, what just happened? And I'm like, oh, this is that moment where the leader just drags the follow.
Yeah.
But then, oh man, it would have been fine if he would have stayed in plank because I'm plenty strong enough for that.
Yeah.
But then he released his hips and all of his weight just went there. And I'm like, that's not how that works. Oh God, it was awkward. I always hate watching
Love
it.
the exit.
If he had just stayed in a darn plank, I could have taken him so much further, but no.
I love Janelle's face in the background as he like comes in towards you.
Let me see. Oh my God, her arms go up.
She's like, okay, yeah, this is gonna be cool.
Yeah, right here, you can tell he's really not ready for any sort of weight support because his hand should really be connected with me and he should be pressing down with his arms. Like it takes a lot of arm strength and upper body strength as a follow.
It does.
To do weight support stuff. So that way you're solid enough to be lifted. Because I don't know if anybody's seen that episode of Mythbusters, but they had an obstacle course to take like a body-sized dummy that was actually weighed the size of a body through, and how it was a nightmare to take this like wibbly wobbly thing. It's so much harder to lift as opposed to a solid box that weighs the same amount. So the solidity is helpful. Okay, I'm done reliving that moment. We can move on.
Janelle's face.
I know. All right. Next. So earlier I was talking about, or Alicia talked about that moment after a break when a leader dominant is following and they're like, wait, I'm following. So all I have right here, I'm going to back up just a little bit. Did a face loop. I have a really light connection on his upper back and shoulder. We did our like miming comedy because the song is Can't Keep My Hands to Myself. Really awkward song to give a role reverse couple. I will say that. Super awkward. But see right there, like he started moving. I hadn't done anything. And I'm just like, oh, geez. So I just started moving with him and then shaping a little bit and trying to encourage his left shoulder to go back into my hand. And then I kind of like ricocheted him into my front hand and spun him. And it's one of those things, again, where he was really driving what was going on. And I was just follow leading.
Follow leading.
And then here we are again. He's not committing to that pocket.
I do want to add that this is still a fantastic example of a lead dominant follow dance. Even though we are kind of like critiquing a little bit, it's more like what could have made it better, because you guys really worked together well with it to make it work. It ended up being a great dance still.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And like I said from the beginning, the whole time I was trying to figure out how do I manage our connection the best for us. And that's how you hopefully should be handling any dance. It's like, how do I make this partnership work now? And because he and I didn't have extensive experience dancing together, I had to roadmap it as we went and figure out how to do it. And you can see right here, I'm starting to really get the hang of it, that to compensate, need to create a lot more scrolling, traveling. So I'm really getting into my knees. I'm taking larger steps and I'm driving harder through my ones, which ends up complementing his forward intention better. And through this end section, I'm like, okay, you want to move? We'll move. So I'm really taking advantage of his pitch and his momentum to really get some lovely length and traveling to our partnership.
Yep.
And it's much more connected at this point because by then I'd like figured out how to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually really loved this section because I'm used to follows not traveling too terribly much through this particular pattern that I enjoy leading. And because he was traveling with it so much, and at this point I understood how to get him in the pocket,
Mm-hmm.
it made this section awesome.
Yeah, this is great. It's great.
It's so good. I love how excited Mia is. But yeah, so that came from like really like working together.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, understanding as like what my job as a leader was through this partnership of what would work best for us. And it ended up working great.
Mm-hmm.
This part, however, he shortchanged his step. And if he had stepped here, we would have been much better balanced.
Yeah.
But instead, he kind of shortchanged himself and then shifted his weight in a bizarre way. So that way, counterbalancing him was difficult. And that's why I have my left foot snake, because his center was too far away from me.
Yeah.
Because he was more split weight instead of being predominantly on his right foot.
Yeah, so he's countering himself because he's not sure if you can take his full weight.
Yeah.
Which is fine.
Yep.
It just ends up being, it puts his center in a weird place for you to shift to.
Yeah, because I'm very much attached to him with this hand, and by him just moving away from me that little bit, it brought my center towards the camera a little bit, and I'm like, oh god, get my foot under our shared center, get it, okay, we're okay.
One of those things you come out the end, didn't die,
we're alive. And then I had never noticed this before because I've watched this video and been horrified because there are so many things of my own that I want to fix, but I had never noticed Mia right here as we're walking off.
Also,
and
what
it
is
just
Austin
is
doing?
so great. Yeah, Austin is, oh my god, it was just so great.
I think just the last thing that I want to reiterate is just really looking at lead dominants that are following. There's a lot of things that have a tendency to happen with most of them. And that's kind of what we were wanting to point out a little bit and just talk about how to adjust to it. So, because he did a lovely job.
Yeah. And this is an interesting thing because would you agree in West Coast Swing, following is harder?
Yeah, I think so.
So it is easier for a follow to lead than it is for a leader to suddenly follow, because following is more difficult. And Z did an amazing job. I adore Z. He's such a great guy, and he's so much fun to dance with. I just wanted to highlight some of the pitfalls because I see them with every leader dominant dancer who follows.
Yeah.
And they're fairly simple to correct once you're aware of them. So that's why I really want to highlight them. And hopefully in December, when we do a very specific episode on that, we will have guest host. We haven't asked them yet, but I'm assuming they will say yes. A leader dominant dancer who also follows on occasion, who dabbles. And then I can ask them hard-hitting, awkward questions. It's going to be great. So
we're hoping to do more in-depth on both ends, on follow dominant that are leading and leading dominant that are following in December. So 2 separate episodes. And hopefully we'll have guest hosts for both.
Yep. Now, a little teaser for next week, because, well, on November 1st at 2 p.m. Pacific, we are having our Tall Follow panel with Bryn Anderson, Michelle Crozier, Tessa Antolini, Phoenix Gray, and Tim Kenny. Hey, I remembered them all that time.
You did.
And me, because I'm also tall. And we haven't had the opportunity to highlight Tessa before now, so we wanted to highlight 2 videos of hers. And the thing I wanted to really get across when we're looking at these 2 videos, and I'm going to share both links at once, is that the plight of a tall follow doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the height of the leader.
Right.
It has to do with whether or not their leader adjusts to them appropriately or not.
Yep.
If a leader is not adjusting and is also shorter than the follow, that's where the huge problems occur. However, the same problems still occur if the leader is not adjusting and they're the same height or taller. So I'm not going to tell you which dance is which. I'm going to be cruel. And then we're going to have a guessing. So I'm going to drop both links in the chat. Go ahead and watch both of them. And then when you come back, tell me which one felt better for Tessa to follow. Ding, 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 ding. Well done.
Both correct.
Both correct. We're obviously on the Tall Follow panel, probably all going to be waxing poetic about all these things in depth. But there are a few kind of roots that really it all comes down to as a tall follow. And what we dream of is being led forward instead of down. Very simple. Also not getting a concussion, but that's the more obvious one. So I don't need to mention it that much. So I wanted to show some bookmarks from each video to really get specific about this stuff. So to the screen share. So the first thing I wanted to highlight is in this closed position. Stephen does a really nice job of splitting the difference between their heights with this open handhold. Something that can get really tiring as a tall follow is because really a leader in open position should be supporting from underneath the follow's hand. So that way the follow isn't having to 100% lift their hand in space.
Yeah.
And the lower a follow's hand is relative to their shoulder, and the more they have to lift it and hold it there themselves, the more strain it puts on the shoulder. I love how well Stephen is really taking that into account, having a strong bend in his elbow and kind of splitting the difference between their 2 heights, because it would look awkward if he were to lift his hand higher than his own elbow. But he does a really good job of keeping it at that same height, and if anything, lifting it up just a little bit higher through this section, and he's not bringing it any lower, which is allowing Tessa to really trust him and to connect with her full frame. And it may seem really simple, but within the first 10 seconds, a tall follow knows if they're going to give you their full frame or not, because we'll discover really quickly, is it safe to fully connect with you, or do I only give you partial control over what I'm doing? And as soon as a follow decides to partially disengage from you in order to make the partnership work as best as it can, you have lost so much you can do with them. And so you might still end up having a really wonderful, really lovely dance.
Yeah.
But you don't have access to everything that is possible for you two as a partnership, which sucks both ways. I would love for all my Ferrari controls to be used, but so many people know how to use them, and it's
one thing I do want to mention is that a lot of times you'll see the shorter leads will be able to adjust better to the taller follows. And it's just because they're used to having somebody their height or taller.
Would
so
agree.
Even with the, the follows that are taller than, average height of leads, like it's still going to be, they're going to adjust better.
Yeah, I agree.
Think about it more often.
Yeah. Whereas taller leads just tend to take it for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why I actually experience the most injuries with leaders my same height.
Yeah.
Because they don't realize that their muscles are reverting to a home base that's designed for a shorter follow.
Yeah.
Then if we go to this simple rock and go, I just love how Stephen is extending his arm in a way that is what I like to call a level experience. His hand isn't going up or down through here. He's just rotating the handhold just a little bit to encourage her to shape into it.
Yep.
But he's maintaining an excellent center counterpoint. And he's also, physics. So his standing foot is here. And because Tessa has more mass than he does, he's really taking advantage of that and essentially hanging off the connection.
Yep.
And you actually work less when you do that. It's very sneaky. So like, it's not harder. You just have to depend on the follow to be connecting with you.
Yeah. I want to add that's relevant to what we were talking about in the previous videos is that for women that are leading, that, that's not their dominant, like it is a lot easier to hang off the connection.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that doesn't happen all the time. I don't know that it's just not taught, or
I think part of it is follows just know what follows want.
Yeah.
So when they change roles,
yeah,
they don't have to do as much to get the correct effect.
True.
So because they can get the same lovely pattern with less effort because they know precisely how to make that happen.
Yep.
So then they don't get used to really adding power to it. And I think that's part of where it comes from. But yeah, I agree that follow dominant dancers who then lead tend not to get used to hanging off the connection like this, which is a really important key to leading, regardless of the height of your partner. Here's another example of him counterbalancing Tessa in a really lovely way. He's doing a ronde, but he's depending on Tessa 100% for his balance because his foot is here. he's hanging off the connection. And then through here, I just love, he does such a lovely job of really extending his ribs to get over her head. And he's making sure to get the radius over her head instead of just a little stir across the center.
I love when it's like, it just grazes the top of the head.
Oh, geez. It always scares me. It's like, oh, I felt a breeze in my eyeballs. Good times. So then, right here. So the hands came down, but after the tension was released. So we have our anchor, lovely center counterpoint. Like, damn, that handhold just stayed right there on the edge of the chair in the back. Like, well done, both of you. And then Stephen basically moves the center counterpoint down the slot, maintaining, what's the word I'm looking for? He moves his center, and it's only after Tessa catches up to him that the hands move down because they're able to relax down. He is not swinging his arm from his shoulder to make her move. He's swinging his arm from his shoulder because she's getting closer to him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a crucial difference. And there's actually a great image of the dance with Conor that I want to highlight.
Yeah.
That stands in contrast to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that he didn't stay in any type of tension because there was that hand switch.
Yep.
I think a lot of times that happens when we're starting with tension and continuing it into that compression.
Yep.
Which is not to say that he wouldn't have done it like either way. I think either way would have done it in a way that would be easy for her to follow.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just mentioning that it's a lot easier to like have that relaxed already.
Yep. All right. Then last one for here, I wanted to talk about how he's really shaped into this post right here.
Mm-hmm.
Really into his left shoulder and really counterbalancing Tessa. Because another thing that we struggle with is tall follows, and this is mostly because of our arm length, actually, less so to do with our height.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to not feel a post until it's too late. And so we often tend to stay a little bit more forward pitched than we would like to. So that way we can stop ourselves and redirect ourselves.
Yeah.
So kind of like actually what Z was doing in our last dance, in his dance with me, in that he wasn't trusting me with his body weight. So he was staying more forward, which again, we can't read his mind. So we don't know if that's because he just has less experience following or if because he was doing that on purpose because he didn't trust me. We don't know. But it's very common as a tall follow to kind of live in that when leaders don't post for us properly.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I wanted to talk about the center counterpoint into this sugar push variation. So if we look at the handhold, he encourages Tessa to really anchor away from him. And then as they come together, he's really coming towards her. And he just sent the handhold back towards the back wall. And it did not go higher. It did not go lower. It did not go towards him. It did not go towards her. And that allowed her to fold really easily into it and not run into him.
Mm-hmm.
You can see how he is actually rotated back to the right a little bit, and that created more space. So she could actually turn to her right even more and really get into that shape.
Mm-hmm.
And having that space as a tall follow is divine. Also, so good. So good. Stretch.
On both parts.
Yes. Love it. And you can just tell how Tessa feels free to dance.
Yeah.
She's not having to micromanage the connection and take care of herself.
Mm-hmm.
She is dancing, not managing. And I would say that is the thing that can be so heartbreaking as a tall follow, because it really, like, we're probably going to be talking about lots of shenanigans next week and like the physics behind it. But at the end of the day, it is heartbreaking when you are a follow dominant dancer and 99% of the time you are managing instead of dancing. And I'm going to move on because I don't want to cry. All right. So Conor McClure is an excellent dancer. I don't want any of this to be taken as negative against him. I'm just highlighting stuff that everyone who leads needs to understand, and how common it is, even if you're a taller leader, to not understand the nuances of this stuff, because it has a huge impact the taller your follow is.
Right.
So
right. We don't want to say that he's doing anything bad. It's just like things that could have made it a little bit easier for Tessa.
yeah, and because again, the goal is to make it to free up your tall follow to dance instead of them having to manage.
Right.
We want Tessa to just have the time of her life and dance. So, step 1, don't bend over into the follow space. First of all, as a leader, it doesn't look very good to make yourself shorter than the follow for a period of time.
Right.
Like, I've always kind of wondered about like the trail of dead leaders I leave behind me in prelims because they don't stand up straight when leading me. Because I mean, you don't necessarily think about it unless someone has explicitly told you. But if you are leading a tall follow and you are breaking your height in any way, shape, or form, so you're shorter than them, like his shape on its own, fine.
Yeah.
Next to her, not so great.
Yeah, it looks more dramatic. If he was dancing with somebody that was shorter than him, it wouldn't really be noticeable.
Yeah. And then the other thing is, if she had not been pitched here, if she was here, he would literally be in her clavicle. And that, it's funny, but it is so awkward. I hate, and it's like, it would be one thing. I do appreciate how his head is vertical. Most leaders, when they do this, they extend the spine. So it's like, auga, eyes into the chest. I hate it. I hate it so much. All right. So now, like we were talking about with Steven, how he did a really good job of leading Tessa forward. This is an example of Conor maintaining that tension and leading Tessa forward by swinging his elbow back and down underneath the shoulder. And you can already tell, like Tessa is trying not to overextend her arm.
Yeah.
Like Conor knew where she placed her foot. So he should understand the physics of her center getting over that foot. And he should extend his arm enough for her to get over it.
Yeah.
But he keeps a really tight arm. So first of all, she's not able to fully get over her foot.
Right.
She's still pitched forward. And it's a really frustrating position to be in as a follow. And then you can already tell there's this downward trajectory to the connection. And you can see his elbow is traveling more down the slot than his body. So he's very much pulling. And the act of pulling, and I drew this in advance because this is how important this is. If there is one thing I could explain to every leader of West Coast Swing in the entire world, it is this. When you lead a follow downward, it messes everything up.
Yeah.
And it is difficult because then the follow spends the rest of the pattern recovering. And then they don't trust you. So they disengage from you. And so all he would have had to have done is from here, not let his elbow drop, but move his shoulder down line.
Right.
Let his arm extend to a more straight position that more mirrored hers, and really emphasized on moving her forward instead of down.
Yeah.
And that tiny difference really makes it changes everything for a tall follow. And it is so important. I cannot emphasize it enough.
Right.
That being said, let's move on. Because it's getting late. Let's see. Then here's another one. If a follow, and this is not necessarily just a tall follow thing, but if a follow is coming towards you, do not push the hand towards them, because that can feel very dangerous. Because it's like, wait, are you actually going to hit me? When I lead face loops, I focus on going straight upwards and just letting the follow come to the hand instead of pushing it into their space. And then right here, like, I love these Jacob's ladder things. However, the way he drives the hands down and forces Tessa's arms into a locked position, and you can see she is counterbalancing that by bringing her head back and her chest up, because of how much downward energy that has. But then, because she has full length in her arms are extended, but they're in front of her hips. When he asks her to move away, she has so much space to cover.
Yeah.
Just because his hand went from here to there, like if we go back and forth, that's not much. You would think as a leader, that doesn't feel like much space. But when it's a tall follow and their arms are in front of their hips, they not only have to get here, but she then has to get over this foot with her centered over it. And that takes a lot of time. And she was sneaky. She took a bigger step and sent her hips back, because this is a fast song. So she did a very sneaky thing right there to manage that situation. But again, she's ending up in that very forward position, which is not a fun place to be in as a tall follow. All right. This is another one of my pet peeves, because this hurts. So again, he's like, again, his shape of really leaning by itself, there's nothing wrong with it. But because she's taller than him, and because of how low on his chest her hand is, he's forcing her to really bend her wrist back. So she doesn't have as much strength to push against him. If he were instead to puff his chest a little bit more and like bow his front forward and keep his spine a little bit more perpendicular. That's a great drawing. That would not only feel better on her wrist, but it'd be easier for her to connect and literally push off of. Also, she's better at this than I am. It's funny. I have a tendency to not aim low. And oh God, this is awful. I'm going to turn off the screen share for this, actually. I tend to keep my hand high, but I have huge hands. And so my middle finger usually gets into that little hollow right there. And I'm just like, it's an uncanny place to touch another human being. Just the things you don't think you would deal with as a tall follow, but yes, it's a thing. Back to the screen share, doodle-a-doo. Do you like how I have two speeds of that now? One slow, one hurried. Then this one, I just wanted to talk about how it might make sense in your brain, tall follow, connect higher, but you never want to connect with someone's neck. In this kind of thing, especially the taller they are, because if they are your height or taller, there's going to be a lot of downward pressure on the neck, and that can be a huge strain. I know I've personally been in two really nasty car wrecks, neither of which were my fault, but I have a shitty neck, and this kind of connection is deeply painful, and I disconnect from it entirely to protect myself.
Well, and you can see that Tessa kind of lowers herself from it. So she feels that on her neck.
Oh yeah, she totally does. She plies.
Yeah. So that it's
sneaky
not
girl.
her neck.
Genius. Nice catch, Alicia. Here's an example of what I like to call the pumping post. So, because, like I talked about earlier, tall follows tend not to feel a post because of the length of their arm. Because you need to actually already be further away from your partner to like start feeling the post.
Right.
Leaders tend to compensate. Instead of shaping themselves or scrolling in any sort of way, which is what they should be doing, they tend to do this weird pumping thing where they just pull the hand down and then let it come back up. And so right here, they have tension in the hand, but then he sent it down and then it came back up. And as a follow, like you have to disengage from that in order to have the movement for the hand to go that way without taking you with it.
Mm-hmm.
Last but not least, I think one of the questions I am most looking forward to asking everyone on our panel is, which pattern is the bane of your existence? Because for me, it's underarm turns. It used to be sugar pushes. I figured that out. Because that's something I have much more control over to manage.
Yeah.
And I since have learned how to do underarm turns and save myself, but they hurt in the soul. Because really, the follow should be going from one side of the slot to the other on an underarm turn.
Yeah.
As a baseline.
Mm-hmm.
But so yeah, he leads a hitch, which does kind of necessitate a forward equal and opposite reaction out of a hitch. That's normal.
Yep.
However, he's only bringing his left hand down the slot. He's not actually rotating to his right at all, which is ending up cutting her off. And she's ending up in this position, which drives me bonkers. I can't tell you how many private lessons I had in my early days where they're like, that looks awful. You can't do that. And I'm like, it's not me.
Promise this is not intentional.
Not me. That is a teaser, because I don't think we're actually going to be sharing videos for the panel. We're just going to be yapping our heads off.
Yeah.
It's going to be great. But I just wanted to show visually like some of the things that make a huge difference to tall follows that I wish more people understood. And I think part of it is the majority of our champions aren't tall follows. So they can't speak to that experience because they don't know what it's like.
Exactly. Which is why, like, you know, I want to reiterate that we're not trying to say that Conor is doing anything bad. He's not.
Yeah.
For shorter follows, it's absolutely fine. Work out perfectly, but just for taller people, there are some adjustments that could make it better.
Exactly. Yeah. And the things you can unlock out of a tall follow. Mm-hmm. I feel like most people don't understand how epic most tall follows are because they rarely get to be seen for what they're truly capable of, because they're, again, managing most of the time instead of dancing.
Yeah.
So join us November 1st at 2 p.m. Pacific for the tall follow panel. It'll be hilarious. There will be shenanigans. There will be questions.
Yes.
It'll be great. There might be crying. We'll see. Yeah. If there aren't any questions, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And yeah, we won't be here next Thursday because it's Sunday the 1st is when the thing is happening. So if you lose track of time and don't realize it's Thursday next Thursday, it's partially our fault.
Yes. Time gets thrown off when we don't do Thursdays for some reason.
It does. Have a good night.
Hey, guys. Yeah. I feel like You and Sam and Phoenix, they're all like, it's my time to shine.
Yep. This is what we're here for. Her hair flick was just so epic. They launched so far. Way back in the day at Norse Hall, Rosie Thor was social dancing, and she did a similar thing. Hair flip, and her fake glasses flew into the air. But she did that like on a hit in the music, but they landed on the next hit in the music. And it was, you can't make that shit up. It was beautiful. Mwah. Oh no, Oreo's coming for me. It's my big cat. Oh jeez. He forced himself onto my chest on an earlier Zoom call. That was very helpful.
I also want to add, which is completely irrelevant, but the way that he's spinning through that reminds me of his rotisserie comment.
I forgot about that.
So had I. But the way that he follows through with his head.
Yep. You should make sure that that's on your list of questions for next week. Define rotisserie.
Speaking of which, I love Bryn's leading technique.
Isn't it great?
Like, it doesn't look different than her following technique.
Yeah, she's similar to Jen in that she's still 100% her. I will say, though, Z and I got 4th, and Bryn and Chris got 5th. So, and I was the only non-All-Star champion pointed dancer in that placement.
Yeah.
I had my little Jack and Jill Rama statue, and I'm looking around going, shit. It was fun.
Yes, all of my champ friends.
Oh, yeah. Oh. I still keep waiting to draw McBenry for that, because I feel like me and Ben would have a grand old time.
I love Ben's following. It just like the very aggressive, like airplane arms. Great.
They're just very functional. Get them out of the way. Great aerodynamics.
Add some extra momentum.
Now I'm imagining Alpha doing that for some reason, because he has such long arms for how tall he is.
Yeah. I can see that.
Dangerous. That could be a separate panel. Long-limbed Westies. We could call it the High Ape Index episode, because isn't that what that's called when you have like really long wingspan compared to your height?
Is it? I don't know.
I'm gonna look it up real quick. Yep. Ape index, ape factor, or gorilla index is slang or jargon used to describe a measure of the ratio of an individual's arm span relative to their height.
Okay.
The more you know.
Something new every day.
Yeah, I really loved that one anchor that Z did, that shape. It was so good. If he had just like...
ever so slightly.
It was so juicy. We could have gotten first. Someday.
Really did. I did love the choices that he made with it, though. Overall.
Yeah. Circling back, because we were talking about Chuck Brown's eye power earlier. When... Because I finally got it through his head way back in the day. It's like, that's not me. And then he saw it and he couldn't unsee it. And he started just yelling at all the leaders who wouldn't leave me down the slot and give me room. It was this short but bright, beautiful part of my history.
That's great.
And I wish people understood. So